Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're going on a really high-stakes, dramatic dive into what was basically the greatest open secret of the 20th century. We are peeling back the Iron Curtain to look at this totally hidden world of ruthless smuggling, secret basement factories, and literal underground millionaires. We're talking about the massive, terrifying, and absolutely vital shadow economy of the Soviet Union. Right off the bat, we run into the ultimate Soviet paradox. I mean, think about it. Here was this formidable global superpower, right? A state that could build nuclear bombs, launch the first humans into space, build these massive hydroelectric dams, and yet, this exact same state often couldn't manage to stock decent sausages in the grocery store or provide its citizens with a basic, durable pair of winter shoes. So, how in the world did ordinary people actually survive?
Okay, let's really unpack this reality. On paper, the official Soviet economy was this incredibly rigid system of quotas, empty shelves, and just gray uniformity. Private enterprise wasn't just frowned upon, it was strictly, fiercely illegal. But, human nature is resilient. As a direct response to those suffocating restrictions, a vibrant, highly illegal shadow economy just exploded out of sheer necessity. Was it undeniably risky? Oh, for sure, but it offered high-quality goods and an underground abundance that the official state simply could not provide.
Section 1. The illusion of the plan. To really understand why this massive black market even had to exist, we got to look at how the state planning system just mathematically failed the everyday citizen. The state literally tried to plan the production of absolutely everything from centralized offices. We're talking down to the last tractor and the last sausage. But this central planning completely ignored actual consumer demand, not to mention quality. So the result wasn't just some temporary supply chain glitch, it became a permanent systemic feature of life that people just called the deficit. Imagine standing in the freezing cold for hours, just shuffling forward in an endless queue, hoping to get some basic groceries or a roll of toilet paper before the store ran out. Because the official system was so unyielding and, quite frankly, miserable, ordinary folks were forced to find completely illegal workarounds just to feed and clothe their families.
Moving on to Chapter 2. Blat, the real currency.
So when money simply can't buy you what you need, you have to find an entirely new way to pay, right? Enter the concept of Blat, the true life-saving currency of the Soviet Union. Blat is such a fascinating concept because it wasn't exactly bribery in the traditional sense. Slipping someone a direct cash bribe was super dangerous and honestly less common for everyday necessities. Instead, Blat was a parallel currency of favors. It was this complex, incredibly essential web of reciprocal relationships. Think about how profound this is for a second. Human trust and social relationships entirely replace the ruble. A tailor might trade a custom-made suit to a doctor just to skip a year-long wait list for a medical appointment. Or a mechanic might fix a store manager's car in exchange for some premium under-the-counter sausage.
There is a quote that just hits the nail on the head here. The real currency in the USSR wasn't rubles, it was the phone book. Social capital completely, totally overrode financial capital. You could have your pockets absolutely stuffed with cash, but if you didn't have the right connections, if you didn't know the specific guy guarding the warehouse or the woman watching the back door of the grocery store, you were leaving empty-handed and hungry. Simple as that.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, Masters of the Underground. Okay, so who was actually supplying all these black market goods? Well, you had an entire cast of shadow characters operating right under the KGB's nose. First, you had the Tsekhoviki. These are everyday citizens who secretly ran massive, unauthorized manufacturing plants right out of their basements. Then you had the Fartsovshiki, often young people or students who smuggled, hoarded, and traded those highly coveted Western goods. And critically, you had everyday women. Operating under the totally safe cover of being housewives, they quietly ran these massive, stealth neighborhood empires. Each of these players took on immense personal risk just to keep the Soviet public clothed, fed, and entertained.
Let's actually walk through the sheer audacity of a typical Tsekhoviki heist. Step 1. You bribe a state warehouse clerk to secure raw materials, say premium leather or fabric, by intentionally writing it off in the official ledgers as defective, sneaky, right? Step 2. You manufacture the goods in the dead of night in a hidden basement or an unheated garage, and you actually focus on modern style and high quality. Step 3. You distribute the products silently through those highly trusted women's networks. And keep in mind the terrifying stakes here. This wasn't a slap on the wrist or a regulatory fine if you got caught. These people orchestrated these supply chains under the constant looming threat of the gulag, or for the really large-scale operations, the firing squad.
To really grasp the stakes of this whole operation, we have to talk about the staggering value of these illicit goods. Get this. A single pair of smuggled denim jeans from a Fartsevich could cost an engineer's entire monthly income. Literally, imagine handing over your entire month's paycheck today just for one single pair of Levi's. Yet, the demand was so immense, and the desperation for just a little bit of normalcy was so high that people willingly paid it. A pair of imported jeans wasn't just denim, it was a potent symbol of individuality and freedom in a society that aggressively demanded gray uniformity.
And we absolutely have to shine a light on the vital role of the women's web in this shadow economy. Operating straight from their kitchens and living rooms, women essentially built these unbustable fortresses of commerce. Through custom sewing, baking, and these completely impenetrable word-of-mouth networks of maternal trust, they drove a massive portion of the underground market. Because they operated strictly through tight personal connections and community bonds, they flew entirely under the radar, rarely attracting the attention of the brutal state authorities or criminal mobs.
All right, Chapter 4, the hypocrisy of the elite.
As this massive underground economy grew, it inevitably collided with the official state apparatus. A successful black market business needed krisha, which literally translates to the roof. Basically, this meant protection. Think about the deep, staggering irony here. The very same state that publicly condemned and executed its own citizens for the crime of capitalism had officials and police officers who were quietly taking cuts to protect those exact illegal enterprises. It was a precarious, incredibly dangerous alliance where the state unofficially but massively profited from the very survival tactics it outlawed.
And the ultimate double standard of the system was just visually undeniable. While ordinary citizens were forced to rely on the dangerous black market, or Blat, just to avoid endless lines for rotten cabbage, the state deliberately created Berioska stores. These were exclusive, brightly lit shops packed to the brim with imported luxuries, but they were accessible only to the political elite and diplomats carrying foreign currency. It was a glaring daily reminder to the everyday citizen that equality in the Soviet Union was mostly just an illusion reserved for state propaganda. Now, for the successful underground entrepreneurs, this created a bizarre psychological drama. It was a true golden cage. Imagine earning millions of rubles, but you literally can't spend a single cent of it openly. If you bought a flashy car or a nice suit, the state would immediately knock on your door demanding to know where the money came from. So what did they do? Well, they buried gold under their floorboards. They hid thick stacks of foreign currency inside the crumbling walls of their tiny, decaying Soviet apartments. They lived as paralyzing double life, terrified of their own success, constantly waiting for a KGB raid that could end their lives.
Finally, Chapter 5, Shadows Become the Future.
So what actually happens when a system built on these massive contradictions finally crumbles? Well, in the 1970s, the shadow economy was forced deep underground, surviving only through high-risk smuggling. But by the late 1980s, facing total economic collapse, the state panicked. They introduced cooperatives, which essentially allowed these seasoned underground operators to step slightly out of the shadows. And then, in the 1990s, the Soviet Union collapsed completely. But the shadow economy didn't disappear. Oh no, it simply swallowed the ruins of the state and became the official market.
And this is the ultimate payoff, the moment where this history explains our modern world. The Tsechoviki and the Fartsevchi already knew exactly how to manufacture, how to ruthlessly negotiate, how to smuggle, and how to survive the criminal krisha. When the Wild West of the 90s hit, these underground operators used their brutal, high-stakes training to instantly step right into the power vacuum. The people who were once hiding in unheated basements, absolutely terrified of the state, rapidly became the incredibly powerful billionaires and oligarchs of the new era.
I want to leave you with this provocative question to ponder. If a system forces everyone to break the law just to survive, who are the real criminals? The secret black market of the USSR is just a profound testament to the universal, unstoppable nature of human resilience. When faced with a rigid system that mathematically and morally failed them, ordinary people didn't just give up. They built an entire shadow world based on trust, favors, and incredible personal risks simply to survive. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.